Welcome to On Democracy with FP Wellman. I am your host, Frederick P. Wellman. We are coming at you live from Half Coast Studios in St. Louis, Missouri. We are so excited for today's show. It's going to be a good one. As always, I want to remind you of our sponsor, Vi Media. Vi Media is an award-winning digital marketing agency right here in the greater St. Louis area and a national footprint now. They can provide proven growth for their clients and partners. It's a variety of ways they do that, a host of industries. But they serve all your digital marketing efforts, and I hope you'll check them out. It's really easy to go check them out. Their website is vi.media. That's VIE.media on the web. You know, usually I go into a really long presentation. I talk about the current news and the guests and all, but yeah, we're not going to do that today. That's just, we're not going to waste our time. Let's get right into it. This week's guest is someone you already know. You probably have heard of him somewhere, so let's not waste any time. With that, let's just get on the show. Let's get going. Matt, go. Welcome to On Democracy. I am your host, Fred Wellman. It's so glad to have you here with us for the show. This is On Democracy. This is the show where we talk with smart people about the state of our democracy, both here in America and, well, frankly, across the globe. It's a global mission right now. This show is really going to be a good one, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking up front, like I mentioned. Our guest is somebody you know. There's just certain guests you invite that don't need a lot of introduction. Steve Schmidt is an icon of American politics. As described, I loved it in the currently airing Lincoln Project documentary, which I can't imagine we won't discuss. He's one of only about a dozen political operatives in the country alive who've managed a presidential general election campaign, and that is quite a feat and quite a thing to deal with. He worked on the George W. Bush campaign, served in his administration for Vice President Cheney, which is a story we'll talk. And of course, he's a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. You regularly see him on TV offering his perspective and his vital, unique way of seeing things. You can read his opinions right now and his insights regularly in his new newsletter, The Warning with Steve Schmidt on Substack. I hope you'll sign up for that. It's fascinating as always, as well as when he speaks. So with that, Steve, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here, man. Thanks for joining me.
It's good to be with you, Fred. Always good to see you, my friend.
Man, it's funny. We were getting ready to this, and I was reminiscing about how we met. It's a story that I don't know if it's been told publicly much, Steve, but for perspective for our viewers and listeners, Steve and I have actually known each other since 2005. When he was much younger, I was much younger. I had shorter hair and less gray, and I was serving as a public affairs officer in Iraq in the Green Zone for a guy named General David Petraeus at the time. And one day I got a call from Ambassador Khalilzad's spokesman who said, hey, there's this guy from the White House coming over, and he's investigating how we communicate between Baghdad and D.C., and I think you should talk to him because you kind of tell it like it is. Because interestingly enough, I was known even then as a guy who kind of tells it like it is. And so I wandered over and had an adventure getting there, and we go to the Greens. I think we met at the Burger King, right, Steve? And we met at Burger King. We called the cool people to Burger King in the Green Zone. And here's this guy, this young guy at the time, bald then, and full of energy. And we had a discussion about, what the disconnect between Iraq and Washington, D.C. was on his mission. And I shared my insight. I think you always say you kind of learned a few things in that conversation. I hope you did.
No, absolutely. So I'll back up on that story. So in the White House, I was, my title was, I was a deputy assistant to the president. And counselor to the vice president. And so in the White House, right, there's three ranks, right, commissioned officer ranks. You have assistants to the president is the highest. So
right.
Nicole Wallace was White House communications director. She's an assistant to the president.
Right.
I had a deputy assistant rank, and then there are special assistants. And so at the White House senior staff meeting that took place every morning, I was probably in that room, right? I was probably like the third, most junior person or the most junior, right? I was in the bottom three.
I've been in that role as lieutenant colonel.
I just barely made the meeting, right?
You're feeling great like me, yeah.
Right. It was like, so I'm in the meeting, hardly ever talk, but like all the White House senior staff meetings, literally every one of them, right, for months was some version of the press is fucking us.
Right.
There's so much good news happening in Iraq, but we can't communicate it. The American people think we're losing this war. The reporters are all in the green zone. None of the reporters leave the green zone and will report. And so literally day after day after day, after month after month after month, right? It was the same conversation every day. And finally, I was like, shouldn't someone from this room fucking go? Right?
To Iraq. Why not? Totally makes sense. Go for the White House to Iraq.
See, like, I mean, like, if it's like we say every day.
Yep.
It's like, I mean, someone can go, right? And like, if you can't, so pretty soon after that, right? There was kind of a conversation. It's like, hey, you'll go.
You just volunteered. Congratulations.
Right? And and so you kind of had this whole crazy experience getting there. Fly in through our secret base in Jordan.
Yep.
The unmarked planes, no tail numbers, the whole deal. So get there and you kind of land at the airport and you're going to the green zone. The first thing you realize, right? It's, we've been there for 2 years and the road, there's one road, right?
Route Irish.
The highway
Route
of
Irish.
death, right?
Exactly.
And you're like, we've been here 2 fucking years and this road isn't secure.
Not even close.
Right? And we don't have control of the road.
Right.
Right. There's the United States of America. Right. So you kind of get in there and it was like such a fascinating experience. But like during that experience, of course, like, I met you and you discovered things because if you're going to send the country's army to war, you have to maintain support for the war. You have to be able to explain it with credibility.
Yep.
And so there's so many lessons, right, on this experience. But one of them, there wasn't even a satellite studio.
Right.
Right. In the American embassy for the purposes of communicating, what's going on here? Why are we here?
Right.
And that's disastrous consequences. I mean, because, public opinion, ability to communicate in democracy, right? Why the most powerful military in the world is halfway around the world doing what it's doing. Right? Why are we there?
Yep.
Is a strategic element and was one of the great catastrophes of the mismanagement, of the Iraq war, which, of course, in the end is one of the great strategic blunders in American history. But we had a good meal at Burger King. and a 20-year friendship that's come out.
We have to tell the second part of the story though, Steve, because the second part of the story is as he was leaving. So I was working for the organization that was building the Iraqi security forces. And at the time there was a rule where senior officials, when they came to Iraq, they could only fly into the green zone and stay, and then they had to be out by dark. And I said, look, man, if you work for the vice president, the next time your boss comes here, you need to leave the goddamn green zone, because like you should go up to Taji, which is a base north of Baghdad, where we're building the Iraqi armored forces literally through the boneyard. I mean, we had these old Iraq and Iran war veterans, it's a true story, literally in the boneyard, the junkyard, pulling these BMPs out and then fucking rebuilding them. I thought it was a really cool story. So he goes, yeah, okay, all right, I'll take that into account. So flash forward from my side of things. I don't know, 6 months. I'm working for a guy named General Marty Dempsey, Irishman, totally different guy. I mean, you couldn't have 2 more polar people than Dave Petraeus to Marty Dempsey. Ended up being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs later. So I guess I didn't screw his career up. But so I'm in my office one day and this Dempsey comes into my office, which is weird because he's a 3-star general. And he goes, hey, Fred, grab your shit. We're going to Taji. I'm like, okay, sure. I'll grab my soldiers. We'll get the photographer. He goes, no, just you. You got to come. I'm like, okay. And luckily I grabbed my camera. I had this ridiculously large like drop bag on my body armor. I always kept a camera because a lot of times even the lieutenant colonel was the only guy around that had, and so I was all right, so we'll go. So we fly up to Taji. I'm like, sir, what the fuck's going on here? He's like, oh, you got some VIP visiting. I'm like, a VIP, huh? I said, really? That's crazy. Any idea who it is? He goes, yeah, I think it's the vice president. And there's this moment. Okay. I'm like, fuck, this guy came over from the White House and I told him that if his boss ever came over, he should visit Taji. And fucking Dempsey was so great. He like looks at me, he's like, what the fuck did you do, Wellman? And I'm like, sir, I think I did this. And sure enough, every effing helicopter in Iraq shows up over Taji. Like, Apaches, Chinooks, and they come fluttering down onto the airfield there, and out jumps this fucker, and I'm standing on the bus of the door of this bus we were going to carry over to the Iraqi side, And he runs up. I don't know if you remember. He runs up to me and he punches me in the chest, and my body armor says, "We're here because of you, motherfucker. This better not suck." And it didn't. It was great.
I tell this story, because this is like a seminal moment in my life, right?
Yeah,
like this,
we talked about it
in like the next half hours it unfolds, right?
Yeah,
about kind of how I see the world.
Okay.
And you always try. People always talk, and I've certainly gotten better as I've gotten older, right? About being like kind of present in the moment, looking around, being aware.
Yeah.
And I however long I was in Iraq, right? It was a couple months. I mean, it was just a place like when you were out of the green zone, wherever, right? We were out of the, in the war, as they called it, right? Iraq, right, is what it was the name of the place outside of the green zone, right? Like when you were in Iraq, right? Like it was a place you paid attention,
right?
You're just aware, right? You're just aware of your surroundings. And so the National Press Corps, White House Press Corps, spills out, right, of the helicopters, and you have an Iraqi platoon, or a special forces platoon, and they're all at attention, right? Cheney's going to come down and inspect them. You got the brass, you got the things, and you and I are hanging back. And
I was taking pictures.
And I think I'm 20 feet away from the formation. And I go, these guys got fucking wooden guns. They got wooden guns, right? I go, Fred, they got wooden guns, right? This is the Iraq. He goes, and you're like, yeah, we can't give these guys guns.
You don't give them live weapons. The Vice President of the United States. I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid.
and I'm like, wow. Like this is 40 guys. Right. They can't find 40 guys in Iraq in the Iraqi army to trust, like with a rifle. Right. Not, unloaded rifles.
Yeah. With the Vice President.
Around, like this, these were wooden guns. They were wet. And so, but it's amazing, right? So White House Press Corps, completely fucking oblivious to this. Right. That these guys were all carrying around wooden guns, and we got around like the helicopter. So like, what was the story there? Right. And what was the story that was reported there? It was just a seminal moment that just like how inobservant people are, right, to what's going on, literally in front of their faces.
Right.
And so it was just an amazing moment. But Taji's nice any time of year, so it was good.
I spent some quality time there. Yes, that's when it rains, and it's a big giant mud pit, so it's not
beautiful.
Great. Yeah,
Beautiful
when I led, a few months, that was my
nice.
Second tour. The first tour, I had slept on that runway, leading my convoy set of vehicles out of northern Iraq there. So yeah, it's funny how you meet, and then of course I retired from the Army. You're with your firm, you were with for many years, and how we connected then as a civilian. I think I remember I had so many contracts with your firm. You didn't know this, and they said, hey, you got so many contracts. Come up to DC office and we'll give you an office. And you get a traveling office. Like, great, this is great. And the president of the officer goes, yeah, just use this guy. He's never here. And it's fucking Steve Schmidt. I'm like, I know this guy. And so me being me, I put my feet up on your desk and send you a picture of it. And here we are. Yada, 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 2022, So, it's funny. We connected over the year. We did business together. And then 2020, I came out. We were in the pandemic. My firm had struggled a little bit. I had to close it down. And I'd worked in that COVID hospital in New York, and you had generously, you and your beautiful spouse had called me to wish me good luck on my 18-hour days up there in New York during the COVID crisis, running a hospital, which was a whole story. And then I called you after I got back saying, hey, look, I ain't got a job, any suggestions? And I tell the story often, Steve, 10 o'clock, I think you called me 10 o'clock my time. I was like, yeah, you're going to work for us. I'm like, oh, okay. Doing what? Veteran stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I've never done politics. Yeah, you have. You're like, you worked for General Petraeus. You did politics. I'm like, that's a good point. And what was it? A month later, I think I actually officially joined August 1st of 2020. And then I was senior advisor of Veterans Affairs. We had the general, which is somewhat documented in the Lincoln Project documentary. You see me as a background player a little bit. I know there's reasons for that, I'm sure, but that's unfolding in real time as we live that. And I'm sure, I know you've written out how it's kind of weird to watch that period of our lives unfold on TV and the whole world see exactly what you said. We knew it was going on. And, I was in it, Steve. You and I talked about this before we got on the air. It's like I was in it and I didn't know half the shit that's going on. I was there. There was a definite lot of things going on. You've had a catharsis moment about that. I think, I think we did good. That we did good. The abandon line was achieved. I think what we did with the veteran stuff. I think what I enjoyed though, Steve, work with you and working with our colleagues at the time was the freedom to do what we wanted. I mean, I remember the idea to put ads against Trump in Military Times and Stars and Stripes, against the commander in chief. And nobody would have done that. Nobody would have had the balls to do that. But we wrote a paper on it and we put it in and it worked. I think we changed minds. His percentage of the military vote went down. His percentage of the veterans vote went down as a key pillar. So yeah, I think you did some bold things. I mean, and you've got some perspective on that now. I mean, where's your head at these days? I know you've seen some frustrations.
I'm going to talk about the Lincoln Project, but I want to tell you, like, just as I was listening to you, and I thought about something like I haven't thought about in a long time, about kind of the Iraq story. And then I've never told this, but so I flew back with the president of Kurdistan. And we flew back on a blue and white G5 from Iraq, from Erbil,
right?
With all these Kurdish Iraqi officials, and we were flying to Washington. And a bunch of these people had never left Iraq, right? Yeah. They'd never been to the United States, and G5 flies high, right? So when you're on a commercial plane, you're at 37,000 feet, whatever a G5 is flying at, 50,000, it's a higher ceiling. It gives you this perspective of the curvature of the earth that's different. It's brilliant. It's something, you can look out the window for a long time. It was this beautiful night. You're flying from that part of the world. You're coming over the pole and down the East Coast. And we flew down the East Coast, really, and we were over Halifax. It was the first kind of jewel that lights up.
Yep.
And it was this brilliant night. Looking at the Iraqis, the Kurds, all of them filling up the one side of the plane, mesmerized.
Yeah.
Looking out the window as this plane flew down the East Coast of the United States, Boston, New York City.
Yeah.
Right? The United States of America coming into view from 50,000 feet. People who have never seen anything like this, right? Who want to be free and have prosperity and peace, right? In this terrible situation, this terrible conflict. And I have never had a moment for me that was more powerful in my life than seeing our country from that perspective after this experience. It was like a jewel.
Yep.
Right? It's one of the most beautiful vistas I'll ever see in my life.
Yep.
And I was just so grateful for that experience. And so when you talk about gratitude, let us talk about the Lincoln Project. And first off, every person in this documentary is a person I gave a job to.
Right.
Every single one of them. Okay. The fame seeking, the resentment, the grievance, the craziness.
Yeah.
And in the end, astonishingly, all of the people who knew about John Weaver, A, being a closeted gay man, but B, using the intern recruitment process to hit on guys in their early 20s. The people who knew that were Ron Steslow, Sarah Lenny, Connor Rogers, and all of those people knew that fact about this guy before they came to work at an organization that he was a co-founder of. They all knew, right? They all admit this on camera. I didn't know. Rick Wilson didn't know. Stuart Stevens had no idea. Connor Rogers, after taking a job, writes this letter. And for the first time ever in this documentary, right, you see this letter, the letter that brings down the Lincoln Project.
Yep.
And it's like nonsense, right? It's a bunch of gossip, right? There was nothing that any organization through a general counsel level could do about it, right? It was all gossip. It was all rumors. No human being who worked at the Lincoln Project ever filed any complaint against John Weaver, right? There were multiple sexual harassment settlements, right, that came by Sarah Lenny. Right? Sarah Lenny, right, is the person who sexually harassed and had to reach financial settlements at the Lincoln Project. These people, Ron Steslow, who had never worked in national politics before, his firm makes $20 million. Reed Galen appoints, he's the biggest vendor to the Lincoln Project. He appoints the second biggest vendor, Ron Steslow, to the board, and appoints Mike Madrid to the board of the Lincoln Project. So you have these three guys that are constituted on a board that's like literally a thermonuclear specimen of conflicts of interest, self-dealing, bad governance, should never have been constituted. And we have no idea about it. We don't know about it until after the election. So this organization is run, spends $100 million, come to the end of the election, and hey, there's a what? There's a board? And Mike Madrid, you see this play out in this documentary, Mike Madrid says, no. As does Ron Steslow, to the question of Rick Wilson and I joining this board for the purposes of cleaning it up. Because my reaction is, you got three guys, you got vendors, you got no transparency, there's no women, there's no minorities. It's just a disaster. We got to clean this up and professionalize this. They say no. And Ron Steslow and Mike Madrid extort in this moment the organization for $1 million more each, while talking pie in the sky, democracy, democracy, democracy. It's outrageous. So now we're sitting there, and this is my greatest regret. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I broke my back by the end of November,
right,
on that horse,
right,
in the Lincoln Project. I was doing something really stupid. I decided to race that horse without a saddle. Just with the reins on. And I was doing well in the race until the final turn. And so anyway, I broke my back. I've said 100 times, right, like on TV over the years, there's two ways to win a fight, by bringing your opponent to submission or exhaustion. And I was just exhausted. We'd accomplished the mission. We were over. I was so outraged by what went on. And I was like, we should call the FBI. Hold a news conference, right? Get our data back. And it's not what we did. What we did was hire crisis firms, law firms, and they came in. And really the entire focus was on trying to cover up the reality that Reed Galen had received this warning letter from Connor Rogers in June. And the point of, and I'd always demanded that this letter be released, is that there was no there. If I say, who are the names of the people that who were sexually harassed by Andrew Cuomo, you can name them. If I say, who are the people who are sexually harassed by Donald Trump, you can name them. Who are the Lincoln Project employees that were sexually harassed by John Weaver? There are none. So if John Weaver started emailing a 14-year-old in 2015, which he did, he was working for John Kasich then. Why wasn't John Kasich asked a question? Why was my name in the New York Times story about John Weaver for something he did when he worked with John Kasich. And the reason for that was because of sensationalism.
Right.
For the clicks. Right. And what the New York Times did is they allowed Connor Rogers, Sarah Lenny, Ron Steslow, Jennifer Horn, and Mike Madrid gave these people anonymity to make an accusation that we covered up sexual misconduct for money, when in fact they were the only people who knew about the behavior. And you watch all of this play out in the documentary. And honestly, at the end, right, you see this stunning in real time poisoning of an organization by Mike Madrid, right? You see this moment, right, where the New Yorker magazine does a profile on the organization, and Mike Madrid, who's a complete amateur, has never worked on a national campaign, is aggrieved, right, that he's not in the story. And you see him poison as a leader and disillusion his team, right? So what were we doing out there? Started an insurgent political organization to fight and defeat Donald Trump that raised $100 million and made a decisive impact in achieving that goal, right? Lincoln Project wasn't a candidate.
Nope.
Joe Biden was the candidate. These people got a small role, right? And they should have been grateful for it. Let me tell you something. 2020 was a year in this country, right, where 1 million people died, where we got people in this country locked in their homes.
Yep.
Parents overwhelmed by schools.
Yep.
But this is Mike Madrid's failure. Because here's the deal. Fame, and the search for fame, it's an empty journey. You know where that journey leaves you? That journey leaves you like Ron Steslow, sitting alone in your fucking apartment, feeling sorry for yourself, looking at the television all alone, watching the 46th president of the United States being sworn in, aggrieved, empty, and alone. Pathetic. That's the story of the Lincoln Project, right? The devolution and exposure of character under pressure in politics. And here's the deal. Our cause, this MAGA movement, this fascist movement is an evil. And I know that I'm on the right side of history.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm proud to have fought it. But here's the deal. We need more grace in our society, right? And some of those MAGA people that are around Trump, right? And some of those people that you see on this Lincoln Project documentary, you could switcheroo those people on any given day because they are the same fucking people. And one of the reasons, right, that we're in this trouble in this moment is because we got to get out of this Trump industrial complex, right? And we got to get to something better. And so I look at candidates like Tim Ryan, right, rising in Ohio, where that guy's going to win. Yeah. And I'm like, thank God, right? Help is on the way. Like we have some genuine leaders, right, in this country, and we got to break out of this cycle.
Right. The performance artist, a piece of, I mean, Dr. Oz, you and me, I've on campaigns. I've got it on my computer. I got Marcus Flowers going against Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. I've got Luke Mixon going against John Kennedy with his cornpone, accent and ridiculousness when he's an Oxford grad. You've got Lauren Boebert in Colorado, this whole class of performance artists and backbenchers who are important because their presence on the right-wing media, their presence in that MAGA ecosphere of that money-making ecosphere. How do we fight that? I mean, segueing away from what our mission is now. I mean, you and I are still in the fight. I joined you for the mission. You know that. I was always about the mission. Yeah. I became the executive because I didn't know any of this, by the way, but I did it because of the mission, and I still believe in that mission. It's still what I'm doing. I have this because I still believe in that mission. How do we fight back against these performance artists? What is the answer to them? And is the good, is the bad? Where do we go?
At the end of the day, right, what separates Marjorie Taylor Greene, from an asylum in the Congress is an election, right? She's got to get votes. So I'm driving last week. I drove up to a place up near Aspen from Park City, And one of the great drives in America, right?
Yeah.
Up into Colorado, down the Stegosaurus Highway, but it takes you through like Lauren Boebert's district.
Right.
It's a beautiful place, right? And like, I guess what I would say to people in the district is we're a country of 320 million people, right? Congressional district, there's 435 people, right? We sent to Washington, D.C., right? They represent about 800,000 people. That's your representative.
Right.
Right? Here's what I want to say to the people of the district. You're not pulling your fucking weight in this country.
Right.
Right? Because you sent to Washington a whack job to represent you.
Right.
All right? My problem with your whack job is they're poisoning the whole of the politics of the country.
Right.
Right? And they're spreading the whack jobbery. And what I want the people of that district to do is give a shit enough to do something about it and fire her.
Yep.
That's what I would like to say.
Yep.
Right? So we have to communicate in this country that there's no magic letter that you could put next to your name that immunizes you, right, from the worst possible conduct, right, that you can conceivably imagine. This is insanity, right? We have to take back our democracy. We need generational change in this country.
Yep.
Right? I don't want to be governed by 80-year-olds. Enough.
Right.
Right? We need reform in this country. We have a level of corruption in this country that is unfathomable, right? And we haven't seen a level of corruption like this in America since the beginning of the 20th century, right? And it spurred the progressive movement. We need epic reform in America.
Right.
Right. The good news is, right, this is the best possible moment in all of human civilization to conceivably be alive. We have infinite opportunity, right? The purpose of politics is to create peace, prosperity, and domestic tranquility for us and our children. We are trustees of the greatest inheritance that could possibly be bestowed. We're Americans.
Yep.
It's a trust.
Yep.
And when you see these vandals destroying the fabric of the country, dividing, bringing to life the rancidity of anti-Semitism, racism, bringing it up out of the ground, giving permission for people to embrace it. You had some cheating scandals at the service academies in the last couple of years, and I was astounded by the fact that we haven't had an honest national conversation about how could that be. Maybe because the commander-in-chief is a degenerate liar. It sent a message because he certainly wasn't held accountable for any of his lies, but the 18-year-old kid was.
Yep.
Right, we got a lot of broken institutions. You and I talked about the Army Major General reprimanded.
Right.
He stood up for his female troops.
Right. Against the right-wing assault.
Tucker Carlson smears.
Yep.
And so he responded to a smear on his troops by Tucker Carlson, the United States Army, in a highly politicized decision that frankly should lead to the resignation of the chief of staff of the U.S. Army. That's who should get the axe.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
Chief of staff of the Army should get the axe. For not defending a major general who defended his troops, right, against Tucker Carlson.
Yep.
Right. You got the senior leadership of the United States military scared shitless of Tucker Carlson, right?
And they know it. And that's the thing. We're feeding them. It's that water. It's the blood in the water, right, Steve? It's the chum in the water that attracts more shark. We don't win by not taking this fight on, right? That's what my fear is all we're doing. If we let them have these wins, it's just more blood in the water. They're going to do it again and again and again. They're gonna win this war, and the loss is to America.
I mean, look, you want to save some money in the military budget, start cutting the personal staffs of general officers, right? These guys are all like Indian Rajas, right, from the 19th century, right?
I lived that life,
I want accountability in American institutions, right? If we don't get it, right, we're going to have further political and economic instability, and we're going to lose our democracy as a result of it.
And you and I talked about this a lot, that the institutions themselves are unprepared for this moment. You know, the moment we face, be it the media, be it the laws, the Hatch Act is a goddamn joke. I mean, the one thing we know for sure is the Hatch Act is a goddamn joke, right? It means nothing if the president doesn't want to enforce it. The rules against these sort of things that our institutes, to include our media, our non-government institutions, I consistently see this. Our institutes are simply not meeting the moment.
I think that I'm going to say something.
Okay.
There's a lot of imbeciles in America who will react with rage to it. So I'll say it. I'll say it.
There goes my YouTube
kind
comments.
Of right?
I'm used to it now.
Is the Bush administration and the Obama administration were very similar places in the White House in that they were buttoned up.
Right.
They were serious, like, workplaces, right? Every single person who was in and out of the West Wing and his administration understood they were working in proximity
right.
to the office of the president of the United States.
They felt the pull of that building.
Dignity,
you can't walk in that building, right?
The pride, right? It wasn't Animal House,
right?
Right. It wasn't Animal House like the Trump administration. Now, my job, I had an SCI security clearance. I talked to the press all the time, right, on all matter of stuff. And I was like a senior political advisor, right? I was one of the top political guys. So I lived in fear, right, of the Hatch Act.
Right.
Right. Like if there was someone who was vulnerable to fucking up the Hatch Act in the Bush White House, I was on the top 5 list.
Right.
Right. And I was terrified of it. I never violated it. Most astounding thing like I've ever seen in my life, right, was is just this moment where Kellyanne Conway just goes out on live national television, just burns it to the ground. It's like, fuck it. Yep. I'll do whatever I want.
Yep.
And that test, right, 7 years later, she may be right. Right, like Kellyanne Conway, like, asserted, right? Right, like this is basically in that moment, like, she asserted, I do whatever I want. Like, right. I work for the president, who's above the law. And the other thing, like, she even took it further, right? She said, no, there's alternative facts. Like, I have my own reality.
Right.
And you know what? She may be right. Right, she may be right. Like, it didn't occur to me that could conceivably be right.
Yep.
You know, but
that's
you know, clearly an astonishing percentage of the country lives in complete fucking alternate reality.
They do. Totally different information flows, you know, and we see it now. And what's scary, Steve, for me is you see this next generation of MAGA. These are the youngkins in their fleece fucking vests, and it's the DeSantis's and others. They get it. They know how they can play. They saw the roadmap. You know how it is. It's the pioneers. I mean, let's face it, right? I mean, the pioneers came across the country in fucking covered wagons, got eaten by, you know, disease and Indians. The ones that followed them had an easier time. Right. And if we don't make it hard, they've seen it. You know, Youngkin would, you know, you remember the Youngkin campaign, he say one goddamn thing on the Bannon podcast and they say another thing to CBS never called it out. You know, so you had these separate separate information bubbles.
Lola,
good dog.
Talking.
They have separate information bubbles, and it's very hard to break them. And it's interesting to me how much criticism we get when we call out those separate information bubbles, because people on our side, on their side of right, also fight us saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be broadcasting these. We should ignore them." Like, you can't fucking ignore them. Half the country is watching these alternative bubbles, right? And that's one of the fights I have a lot, is the idea we should ignore these guys. No, we can't. It's not a fight you can walk away from.
I don't. It's. You can't fix stupid, right? And it's really stupid, right? No, right. It is. I mean, this is an extremist movement. It can't. Let me ask you a question, right? Is the extremist movement more potent and bigger today than it was 2 years ago? The answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, without question. In my heart,
without question. And so,
more extreme.
Is it bigger today than it was 4 years ago?
Absolutely.
How about 6 years ago?
Absolutely.
Right. Where are we today down the river from where we started?
Yeah.
Right? We're at a different place. Guys calling for civil war, violence,
openly,
anti-Semitism, openly. So we're going to 100% have political violence. Like, we already have, right?
We are. I argue we are. Right?
You know, it's ongoing, right? It's going to worsen, right? It's going to work. There's going to be a moment, like right now. It comes to that observation in danger, right? As we edge towards national catastrophe. when that catastrophe comes, and it's coming, what it will help achieve is national consensus, because everybody will understand at a certain point, regardless of whether they like Trump or not or whatever, we will all understand that we're in the middle of a catastrophe together. Right? We will all understand it. Some people don't see it.
Yep.
Some people will see it late. Some people will see it early. Some people will feel it earlier than others. Right? But the idea that there will be no consequences for a 21st century pluralistic nation with 35-40% of the country engaged with some level of sympathy in an extremist movement, and that extremist movement, well-funded, organized. I mean, here's the deal. Leonard Leo is a political extremist, deeply cynical man, head of the Republican judicial confirmations. He was just gifted $1.6 billion.
Jesus.
That's $80 million a year on the interest forever, right? For the appointment of extremist judges. There's no money flow like that coming into the side that's pro-democracy.
Zero.
Right?
Zero.
The extremist cause. Yep. Ken Griffin, the Chicago hedge fund billionaire, this guy is Herschel Walker's pimp. Right? He's going to spend $100 million in this election cycle. He's a hedge fund guy. Why is he doing that? Right? Does he likes the fact that Herschel Walker's like paid for all these abortions? Is that why?
Right.
Right? Like he likes that. I'll tell you why. Right? Because he thinks that he puts $100 million in and he's getting $3 billion out.
Right.
That's why.
Right.
It's a transaction.
It's an investment.
And he doesn't give a fuck that there's 10,000 graves in Normandy facing back across the ocean. Young men who never came home. Right? He looks at Arlington National Cemetery, Ken Griffin, Steve Schwartzman. These men don't care. They want to make a buck. And they're poisoning American democracy by funding this extremist movement.
Yep.
And it's sickening.
It is. And it's incredibly dangerous.
You got a political party full of little Lindberghs and little Eichmanns, funded, by a elite that is corrupt beyond description, corrupt, out of touch, and deeply uncaring for the future of their country. It's disgraceful.
It is, and we all pay the price. In the end, it will affect us. It will affect our kids. I've got grandkids, for God's sake. I mean, it affects all of them. And where do you go? And then, of course, those of us who fight it are called fools half the time. It's just,
right.
But all we can do is fight. I mean, I guess, we've gone for a while. I don't want to take all your day. In that fight for you, Steve, and you're out now, you're no longer with the Lincoln Project. You're still doing your thing. What's next for you? Where's your place in this fight going forward from now on, Steve?
Well, look, I want to use the platforms I have, right, to be an advocate for American democracy, to try to communicate to people about what's at stake.
Yeah.
To help them understand how grateful they should be. Yep. Right. The opportunities that we have. Right. There's been no untroubled times in American history.
No, it's still fantasy to think so.
But we have a really self-pitying culture, right? Everybody. I just like, you look at the people. I was thinking about one of the deepest shows I've ever seen in my life that's been on broadcast television, right, is a story about a journey. And it's the prequel to Yellowstone. Right. The show is 1883.
Right.
And it's incredible. Right. When you get to the end of it, right, it's one of the few things I've watched, like the last scene, it's just like speechless. And just like walking around like, a month afterwards, like thinking about this. But I'm thinking about these people like on the Lincoln Project, right? That like journey, like who would have made it, right? On a wagon train, right, from New Jersey, to California.
Yeah.
Right. And like you look at like Ron and, Mike and, I'm not, they wouldn't have made it to Harrisburg. Right. The vaingloriousness, right. The ego, right. It is astonishing. Right. And I think this like other thing, like kind of in the Lincoln Project series is a lot of broken people are attracted to politics. We gotta get normal functioning people back involved in the American political process as an urgent national matter, right? Like you can't, all the normal people, the well-adjusted, like healthy people in society, right, that you meet generally are like, I want nothing to do with politics. Like you got to be involved in politics. Like we all have to be involved in this, like, or those people, the Ron Stesslers, the Mike Madrids, the Connor Rogers, the Jennifer Horns. Oh, holy shit. Right, where we have all of it is conspired together to create this national catastrophe, and we need better. Yeah. And that's what I'll try to speak to the best of my ability.
Great. Yeah, well, you've got a unique platform and you've got a unique voice, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. It's funny you say that. It's not a day goes by that my girlfriend doesn't say, you got a fucking weird life. Yeah, it's been a weird couple of fucking years, it's been a journey, needless to say, from that first phone call. I
always think sometimes, like if I woke up from a coma, right? Like, like if it was like, if something like whatever, and it was like, where are you going to be? Right. And it's like, like 1.5 million people follow you on social media, and you're going to be viewed as a democracy activist after Donald Trump became president and had a coup, and the whole Republican Party becomes a fascist enterprise, right? Yeah. Holy shit! Like this actually happened. Like this happened, right? Yeah. And there's not a fucking hour that goes by, right, that I don't like think about that with like wonderment for at least 2 seconds.
I was sitting there, we had Whoppers in 2005. I joined you, I was just a veterans advocate, just trying to do my damn thing and help veterans, and here we are. So, well, Steve, I can't thank you enough for your time. As everybody knows, I can find you on Twitter at Steve Schmidt, SES, and
all right, else. Fred.
I appreciate you so much. As you always go, you should always find me on Twitter, of course, FP Wellman, and on Instagram, FP Wellman Official, and On Democracy returns every week. We broadcast on Thursdays. Our next guest going to be terrific, talking about our institutional rot as well, and I can't wait to share that with you as soon as we book that down. Steve, thanks, man. Always a pleasure. It's been a pleasure knowing all these years, and I look forward to working with you in this fight again.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Thank you.